and welcome to another episode of Starship Gaming. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps out. It helps the channel grow. It helps keep me motivated to keep making more awesome videos. And of course, don't forget to hit the bell if you want notifications of when we release more awesome videos. Now, also don't forget to stick around until the very end of the video. I have a big announcement. Will it be good? Will it be bad? Stick around and find out. So let's jump right into today's subject. And also on another note, if you haven't watched my past few episodes, they have some very important information that if you're a fan of ours, you need to really watch to listen. One of them I addressed the Atari VCS. Like I said in one of my past videos, I'm just kind of tired of talking about it. It just seems like there's just too much negativity out there from people about it. And because of that, it just makes me not want to talk about the Atari VCS. So until there is some, more news about it that comes out, I will not be talking about it. So that's that. Now on to today's subject, the Intellivision Amico. This year is going to be its year to shine. And yeah, there's a lot of people out there saying, how do you know it's going to succeed? It may be a big flop upon release. This one you can't really say whether it's going to succeed or fail, because they're really, it's different. It's taking a new console. It's the first new console in years, and introducing it to the market. This market that's been shaped over the past 20 years by Nintendo and Microsoft and Sony. And yeah, I've talked about the subject of the Intellivision Amico a lot, but I figured, you know what? I'm just going to throw in another video because I like to talk about it. It's true. I personally think that this year will be the year that Intellivision, the brand, the name, has its big comeback. We still don't know a lot about the Intellivision Amico. We don't know how. I made a video about how I thought that the games might be. We don't know yet. Those were theories. I had some some varied responses on that. Some were quite angry. Those were just opinions. They weren't fact. So don't take it out on me for just what I personally think. Of course, if you haven't watched all of our Intellivision Amico videos to get the full picture of what I talked about with them, you need to go back and watch every single one that I've released. But I think the Amico is on track to be, it's going to be, or I feel like it. This is just opinion. I feel like it's going to go on track to be one of the. It's going to be up there with Nintendo and all of them. I have that feeling. If it doesn't, I'm going to be very, very disappointed. But I have a feeling that it'll hold its own in the market. It could be up there in terms of sales. It could be up there with like the Nintendo Switch. What their sales are now, 2 years on. I feel like that 2 years from the release, it could be at those levels, if not more. But the thing in television, the thing Tommy Tallarico should do is just promote the crap out of this thing. Just, commercials, newspapers, if anybody really still reads them anymore. I still read my local newspaper, mostly for the print ads, but newspapers, television, internet, social media. He needs to really push it more than he already is now to get it into the public conscience that Intellivision is back. They're going to make a loud noise. You know, they're here to stay. They need to do that and able to have proper market penetration. The thing about other brands like Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo, they don't really have to do that. They're just like, oh, here it is. We're releasing a new system. Take it or leave it. That's pretty much how they are. None of those companies have had to work so hard to push their new consoles, their new brands, I should say, since they launched their very first console, like Nintendo. Of course, Nintendo had a little bit of help. They developed arcade games, which were already pretty well known at that point, like Mario Brothers, Donkey Kong, you know, all of those. They already existed years before the launch of the NES. And when the NES did launch, everybody within 3 years time after launch, everybody wanted one. And from there, the last time they really had to push a console was when the Super Nintendo came out. After that, it was pretty much smooth sailing. Of course, you know, they had to push the 64 and the GameCube a little bit, but after that, it was pretty much smooth sailing. Nintendo already had maximum market penetration. They didn't have to worry about, They didn't really have to worry about anything because the name Nintendo was synonymous with gaming. It's just, the name's got to get out there. Of course, Intellivision already existed before, but it's a brand that really didn't have it didn't have a really big following when it came out. There were people who were dedicated to it. They had the choice of Atari or Intellivision or that Bally machine that came out, or any of the dozen clones and whatnot that came out at the time. Odyssey 2, of course, but all of those. You get the picture. It was in the top 3 by 1983, you might as well say. It was probably up there along with the ColecoVision. Of course, we could make it a top 4 if you wanted to put the Commodore 64 in there. Of course, the Commodore 64 really wasn't a gaming console. It was basically a home computer. I mean, technically you could put it in that category, but for the sake of things, we're not going to call it a console. We're just going to include it as a video game console, along with the Atari 2600 and later the 5200, which the 5200 was a massive failure for Atari. And then you had Intellivision, which Intellivision, it went on for a pretty good long time. I actually have somewhere in storage a catalog that Intellivision for Intellivision games, and I believe it was the spring 1988 catalog. So we know that they made new games for this for at least a decade. So it was, it was out there. It lasted longer than the ColecoVision did. That was for damn sure. But we're getting way off track again. But you understand what I'm getting at. And then when we look at, the other brand, Sony, with the first PlayStation, it was an uphill battle for the first 2 years for Sony. And they ultimately came out on top and beat Sega. It was, when you look at some of their games the first 2 years after the first Sony PlayStation came out, they're not particularly good titles. You have your few here and there. 1997 was the year that some of the greatest titles started coming out. Of course, you had, in 96, you had Crash Bandicoot, but for the sake of things, we're going to say that 1997 was the year that the Sony PlayStation really shined. And then we look at the Microsoft Xbox. Upon launch, I mean, there was big hype for it. It didn't really do good the generation it came out. I believe it might have been in third place. GameCube, of course, being in second, and the Sony PlayStation 2 in first. For Microsoft Xbox, it took them at least until 2005 to really gain a grip on the market, because it was one of those consoles that was geared towards the mature gamer. Kind of like how Sega was. Sega was more targeted to mature gamers and not so much kids. I mean, of course you had Sonic, but you get the picture. And that's what we're looking at with the Intellivision Amico. It's different from the others because it's a brand that's already existed. But it's going to have an uphill battle for the first 2 or 3 years. First, you have to look at what it's geared towards. It's geared towards children and families. Children and family is the category. And I believe they said I'm pretty sure they said this. No game would be more than E10 plus, rated E10 plus. That could be a good marketing ploy. This is a family-friendly console. The whole family can enjoy it. There's going to be games that they're good, clean fun. There's going to be, some of them are going to be a little violent, but not more violent than what your 10, 11-year-old would watch on Cartoon Network. Of course, before Adult Swim comes on. Does it still come on at 9 p.m.? I literally have not watched Adult Swim in years. I just watch everything online now that's Adult Swim related, Rick and Morty, that's the only thing I really watch. I tune in for that. I don't tune in for anything else anymore. Not since they took King of the Hill off. We're getting way off track now. Anyway, the Intellivision Amico is going to have a uphill battle. They have to really market this thing to children and families, and they have to really do some convincing. Of course, I'm an older person. Well, older as in, late 20s. I myself did not grow up with the original Intellivision. I later got one secondhand from a friend of mine back in the it was early to mid 2000s. So I recognized the name, the brand, and yada yada yada. But as an adult, I'm actually really curious about this new reincarnation of the Intellivision name, as the Intellivision Amico. And I'm honestly really excited for this console. Honestly, I'd probably pick this over the Atari VCS if I had the, I plan on having both. Of course, the Atari VCS is planned to come out first. Of course, it was reported that it's going to try to make it, the Atari VCS was going to try to make it for a March 31st release date. That's what they're sticking with. They're still telling people it's going to be March 31st for the Atari VCS. And like I said, and yet this, kind of infuriated people. People were saying, that's lies, you're just going to get a whole bunch of nothing on March 31st. Stop being so negative. Just everybody, let it have some room. It needs a wide berth. But all jokes aside, In the event that it doesn't, like I said, don't hold your breath. The Atari VCS might not hit its target date for release. I mentioned that in the video and people still took it literally. They didn't listen to my entire conversation about that. Really listen, people. Before you shoot the messenger. The Intellivision Amico, of course, October 10th, 2020, 10/10/20 is the set release date for this. And, there's still so much mystery surrounding the Intellivision Amico. We don't know what the physical games are going to be like. There's this theories. Of course, like I said, I made a video talking about the theories about it, of what a game could be like. If you haven't watched that video, watch it. And there's just so much mystery behind it. And I think that's what really draws me in. Is that there's just so much mystery behind the system, and it compels me to want it even more. Of course, if you were the early bird, you were able to pre-order a Founders Edition, which those were very limited. Nice wood grain, by the way. I really like that touch. These are probably going to be someday one of the rarest ones to get, collectors to get their hands on, these Founders Editions. Unless they decide to just mass produce one and just not include, all that jazz with it, if you know what I mean. But honestly, I think 2020 is going to be the year that Intellivision starts its comeback as a brand. I honestly think that, like I said, it's going to be an uphill battle for the first 2 or 3 years. It's not just going to be a success overnight. Nothing is a success overnight. Anybody who says something is, you need to really reassess what you're really talking about. But honestly, it's going to take a few years for this to really catch on, if it succeeds. It may not, but I have a good feeling about it. I do believe that it's going to. So if you stuck around to the very end and listened to all my rambling, I thank you a lot. Your support is really, really well liked. I like to hear from all of you. Also, on a side note, if you've noticed on a few videos, I disabled the comments. I've done it for a few reasons. One of them was, of course, the information was just out of date and didn't really need any commenting to. But my question for you, before we move on to the next subject that we're going to talk about today, tell me in the comments down below, do you think the Intellivision Amico is going to be a huge success or a huge failure? Why or why not? Please be nice to others. Please don't bash their opinions. It's not nice. So now we're on to our big announcement. The big announcement is I'm going to start doing more reviews of video games in general. Of course, my reviews don't include all the fancy stuff like, they don't include footage. Of course, if you're going to talk about a game, do you really need footage to discuss it? I mean, what did you all do before YouTube came along? We had magazines. Magazines talked about video games and what their features were. So I don't really need videos of gameplay footage. But I would, I do need your all's opinion though. I'm going to be covering for the next few in April. Yeah, in April, I'm going to be doing reviews of several games, several classic games, particularly PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, and PC. And when I say PC, I mean games made 2006 and before. Nothing newer than 2006. So I need your all's opinion on what games I should cover. just throw out some games that you want me to talk about for those systems that I mentioned. Just say, I'd like you to talk about blah, 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 you know. Klonoa, for example. If you want me to talk about the one for PlayStation 1, I'll talk about it. Or any others. Just throw out some. Make a list if you want to. I won't be able to cover them all, but I'll take a look and assess whether they're ones I really want to talk about or if they're a game that has been talked to death about on the internet already. So, yeah, let me know in the comments about that. And if you stuck around, I really appreciate it. Your support, like I said, I really love it. So, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell if you want notifications of when we make more awesome videos. And until next time, I will see ya.